Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, thousands of people marched through Johannesburg in protest against a proposed minimum wage that many say is just too low, at 20 rand or €1.20 an hour. Also, the Israeli government announces this week that it's scrapping controversial plans to forcibly deport African migrants. Over 40,000 thought to be living in the country after having been denied refugee status. And a search for champions in Togo. Its national team coach is trying to sow the seeds for a flourishing grassroots football scene and cultivate the talents of young sports people who'd mature into soccer stars of tomorrow. We take a closer look. Thanks very much for staying with us. First up, thousands of people marched through Johannesburg on Wednesday in protest against a proposed minimum wage that at 20 rand or €1.20 an hour, many labour unions say is just too low. Marches were held around the country, including Johannesburg, Durban and Cape Town. New President Cyril Ramaphosa's made revamping the economy a priority and sees minimum wage as crucial to tackling instability in the jobs market. Well, critics say it will lead to increased unemployment, and some unions believe that they have not been included in talks about the wage. Stay with us. We will be joined by our correspondent in the country a little later on, hopefully, for a closer look at the ramifications of those protests and Cyril Ramaphosa's efforts to kickstart the economy. Well, in other news, Antananarivo saw its fifth day of protests on Wednesday. Demonstrators are angry about new electoral laws that they say have been engineered to elbow out the opposition by barring some candidates from standing in upcoming presidential elections. Supporters of former President Mark Ravalomanana headed to the High Court with a petition calling for the current leader to step down. Last weekend, 2 protesters were shot by police amidst the unrest. Now, this week saw the Israeli government announce that it was scrapping controversial plans to forcibly deport African migrants. Over 40,000 are thought to be living in Israel after having been denied refugee status, and the issue has become increasingly politically charged.
Pulling the plug on forced deportations. The Israeli government says it will not expel African migrants after it failed to find a country willing to take them in. Instead, they'll have to continue renewing temporary residence permits every 60 days. Israel says they're simply seeking a better life, but the migrants argue they're fleeing war and persecution. Their hope is that the government will let them stay permanently.
It was a difficult time that for the asylum seekers here in Israel on the matter of being deported or being imprisoned for a lifetime. And it's good news to hear that the forced deportation is cancelled. And also it's a time that there should be a humanitarian solution for the asylum seekers.
I'm very happy to see the deportation policy is cancelled. And now it is the right time to the Israeli government to give a solution for the asylum seeker came from Africa, a refugee status, or to answer their asylum claim application.
Last month, Israel's Supreme Court suspended one of the government's main immigration policies. Asylum seekers had been offered nearly €3,000 and a plane ticket to leave, or face detention and deportation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later cancelled a UN deal to relocate them abroad. He now says he'll seek a new law to reopen the detention centres. Until then, these migrants in South Tel Aviv continue to face an uncertain future.
Well, we turn now to our top story, that of protests in Johannesburg over a proposed minimum wage that equates to about €1.20 that many unions say is just too low. It is a challenge to new President Cyril Ramaphosa's promises to try and kickstart the economy. For a closer look at all of this, we're joined by our correspondent, Jane Flanagan. Jane, Ramaphosa's a former trade unionist himself. How do you see him navigating his way through this one?
Well, of course, he's occupying a number of positions here. He is trying to win back a lot of those voters who were lost under the rule of Jacob Zuma. They're mostly poor, black, unskilled. He has prioritized youth unemployment as part of his first 100 days. But of course, he is a self-made billionaire. And people have said, can somebody who's so wealthy and has left his trade union roots so far behind truly now be sympathetic to the very low wage earning majority in South Africa? And of course, he's trying to appeal to overseas investors. And there have been criticisms that raising the minimum wage, as the ANC has undertaken to do, will in fact put the brakes on growing the economy, put the brakes on growth of jobs and all the things he says he's trying to achieve. So it's going to be difficult for him to navigate his way through this and to appeal to all sides who seem to be very diametrically opposed to each other.
Well, faced with the level of criticism over the proposed minimum wage, is there much wiggle room in changing the 20 rand that it's currently proposed is being set at?
Well, no. I mean, the government have made a commitment for that minimum wage. Of course, for the unions, 20 rand is never going to be enough, and they refer to it as apartheid era wages. But for the employers, they say 20 rand an hour is going to be too high. What seems to be holding things up and seems to be presenting the biggest challenge is that the wording of the legislation that has gone back now to Parliament seems to have stripped away some of the workers' rights to strike, to negotiate a position, to improve their situations. Some key sectors seem to have been left out of the legislation altogether. So it's in the finer detail now where some of the unions are happy and some of the unions are not. And it is making sure that there are no loops and gaps in the legislation whereby poor people that Cyril Ramaphosa says he's trying to help will fall through those gaps and end up being worse off.
Thanks very much. Jane Flanagan there for us in Cape Town. Well, Togo's national team coach, Claude Le Roy, is trying to sow the seeds for a flourishing grassroots football scene and hopefully cultivate the talents of young sports people along the way. Le Roy's been in charge of the Sparrowhawks since April 2016 and has guided the West African country to the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations in Gabon. He's now also behind the top Seed Togo programme.
On the lookout for the next Emmanuel Adebayor, Togo's national football team manager, Claude Le Roy, launched a new initiative in January trying to promote grassroots football across Togo. Over 9,000 boys and girls participated in the Top Seed Togo 2018 programme, with coaches searching for very specific traits.
As planned and as outlined in the program, the skills that we're testing here are speed and power, although that's not the most important thing at their age, compared to things like being able to control the ball and dribbling. But most importantly, being able to appreciate what it takes to be able to play football.
The selection process was open to youngsters between the ages of 12 to 17 who were recruited from all over the country. Only 60 candidates were selected to go to the finals, which were played in the capital Lomé on April 20th. Togo is only ranked 125th worldwide by FIFA and are the 35th best nation in Africa.
I have to work a lot, more than I have been before. You have to have a lot of self-confidence, and sometimes you may even have some hidden talents that you may not be aware of. So you have to work a lot in order to nurture that talent.
The players will have the chance to showcase their skills in a youth tournament in France next year, and perhaps even attract the attention of some scouts.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.